Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Crane, and I am the Program Director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. And you are listening to Global Industry Spotlight, a conversational series with small organizations, businesses, and entrepreneurs about their work in the creative industries. We are streaming live out of the Comcast Business Startup Studio, located at 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. I'm very excited to announce an event coming at the end of this month on August 29th in Bridgeport called The Music Bloom. It's a professional music series that we're kind of taking on tour throughout Chicago neighborhoods. This event will focus on discussing record labels, press, and booking, and everyone who comes gets access to our Making Money with Music online course. Visit cceglobal.org to learn more and register. Today, this global industry spotlight is on Polina Osherov, a commercial photographer with nearly 3 decades of experience as an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder and a dedicated advocate for the creative economy in central Indiana. Throughout her journey, she has launched and managed multiple ventures, showing her mettle as a business owner, creative thinker, and influential leader. One of her notable endeavors is Pattern, a nonprofit organization she co founded in 2010. Taking on the role of editor in chief for Pattern magazine in 2012, Polina has been at the helm of over 170 successful events, mentoring over 150 interns and creative fellows, and publishing 23 issues of the magazine. She has also spearheaded more than 90 campaigns and projects collaborating with local companies and brands that value culture and community. We are very excited to talk to Paulina today. Let's bring her into the conversation.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to meet you and learn about your work. Um, I would love to get just kind of a little bit of a background. Obviously, you've been a professional photographer. I love something that says on your website, if you're looking for the cheapest photographer, I'm not your girl. Which
Not anymore.
I love that. I love that transition of, anyone who's doing arts. It's like you start out young and you take all the gigs because you're trying to just, grow. And then you hit a point where you're like, well, no, you're paying
Right.
for my experience now. Now it's
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I think that's right. It's funny how your perspective changes. And you were reading my bio, and I was just like exhausted listening to it. Like, wait, maybe I'm taking on a little too much, but that's the entrepreneurial way, isn't it? Like we just can't get enough of all the activity and problem solving, I think.
Yeah. And also, I mean, being a photographer for myself, I was a full-time musician. And my curiosity just led me into new spaces, right? And also just how to generate income, how to support community. All of these things were a part of my work that guided me kind of on my journey. And it seems like it was almost similar for you, in terms of, you are an expert in one craft, and then it kind of led you into these other spaces. Can you just talk about kind of that transition and that work that you moved with, with Pattern and getting into that?
Yeah, happy to. The transition was interesting. All of my transitions have been pretty interesting. Certainly would never have guessed that I would be doing any of the things that I'm doing right now. But um, photography is something that I fell into relatively early on by virtue of my father being a cinematographer. And so I learned how to use cameras at a fairly young age when I was a teen. But then back in those days, it was still film photography, and my parents didn't really encourage me to pursue it professionally. So I kind of went on my merry way and finished high school, went on to college, got like a medical degree, a physician assistant degree, got married, had kids, started taking pictures of the kids as one does. And all of a sudden, it was like, wait, I think I really like this photography thing, and also I might be kind of pretty good at it. So I picked it up and ran with it from there, and tried all the things that one would as sort of more or less self-taught. Weddings and babies and families, really didn't like any of that. And then one day accidentally ran into a makeup artist who worked with fashion models. So her and I got together to do a fun little shoot, and it was like the heavens opened up, and all of a sudden I had found my photographic calling. So started shooting a lot of fashion in Indianapolis, which, as you can imagine, meant that very quickly I became like the top fashion photographer, but also like by virtue of being like the only fashion photographer. But that doing those photo shoots, working with models and pulling clothes from local fashion designers is what brought me to a meeting of those fashion designers who were sort of commiserating and talking about how it seemed to them that in Indianapolis and Indiana, there was a growing interest in fashion, but the infrastructure for small business owners in the fashion industry just wasn't there for them to grow. And what could we do about it? I just
Mhm.
happened to be there because I knew all of them. I don't really know. So a decision was made to launch like a collective. It was called
Yeah.
Indianapolis Fashion Collective. There was a great number of people involved. I was just one of the people on the periphery, if you will. But one thing that I did do that was tangible was create the website, which is still the website that we have today, although it looks a lot different. I like to think somewhat better. But I had this tangible thing. And while pulling together as a collective with no clear leadership, no real funding, no experience in growing in the industry, ultimately led to that initial effort kind of falling apart. I survived the transition to when Indianapolis Fashion Collective was rebranded into Pattern by
Okay.
some very smart people in our community, specifically Christian Anderson, who at the time had a shop called Studio Science and is now one of the principals at High Alpha. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
It's a
No, I'm not.
VC.
Hmm.
Anyway, so their whole mandate was, look, you're trying to do too much. You're acting like you already have a community built. You don't. Start meeting. Make the point of entry for folks who are interested in fashion, whether professionally or aesthetically. Make it super low. And that's how you're going to build a community. You have this common cause, bring people together. And so that's what we started doing, and it worked wonderfully. We saw the numbers grow. We saw the interest in creativity just be really, really high. And this was 13, 14 years ago when, in Indy at least, we didn't really have any meetups that brought together creatives. It just was not happening. There's way more going on at this point, thankfully. But back then, we were like the only ones. And so somehow I eventually found myself at the head of this thing. I don't know. Tell me where I went wrong because just still people will ask me and be like, "Oh, did you study like some aspect of nonprofit management? Do you know a lot about fashion?" And mind you, to be clear, we are no longer a fashion organization. Like it it took a little bit, I'd say probably 4 maybe 5 years for me to realize that like there was no way to get funding.
Just if you were just in fashion.
Correct. There was
Okay.
no money from an economic development standpoint
Yeah.
because nobody believed that it would be feasible here. And there was no money from philanthropy because they were like, fashion? I mean, we've got like cancer and starving children
Right.
homeless people. Like, sorry, like it's, we like it. We like it for the city. It's cool. It's sexy, whatever. But good luck figuring it out. So, by virtue of that and some other things that transpired, we kind of decided to open our doors to everybody, be an umbrella organization for not only fashion designers, but graphic designers and videographers and photographers and creative writers and then content creators and, and so on and so forth. And so that's kind of where we find ourselves today, 14 years into this thing. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's I'm always fascinated with how how people build communities and also what the community needs, right? Every community is different. So obviously with the fashion people at first, there's going to be specific needs.
Yeah.
um, what did you find that people involved in fashion, what were their needs as a community? What were they looking for, in pattern, in this group in Indianapolis?
So the big, big need at that time was having a cut and sew facility that was local to Indianapolis.
Okay, so
So
space.
yeah. Well, a place where designers could take their items to be made that had low minimums.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that it works is, you design a collection, let's say you show it, let's say 10 boutiques order, you know, 50 pieces each. How are you as a single solo shop do that? How do you fulfill that order? Well, you can't. So you farm it out to a cut and sew facility where they make it. You give them a pattern, or they make you a pattern, and then they go about making those items. There's just not a lot of that in the Midwest and in the United States, right? Everything got offshored. Everything's in China or India. But if you want to go that route, it's very, very prohibitive, both from logistical and financial standpoint.
Hmm. So you're
So
saying it's more expensive to do that overseas, or just for like smaller runs and smaller boutiques, it just doesn't really make sense.
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
it is more expensive to make things here in the United States, but in order to make things in overseas, you have to order 5,000,
Right.
right? But what if you only need 500?
Right.
What do you do? It's still a really big number that you can't get and fulfill fast enough. So yeah, that was a big need. And there's no ecosystem, right, for supporting folks in that space in terms of um, uh, funding, loans, marketing, experts,
Right.
somebody to come along and provide mentorship to an up and coming, say, crew of designers, right? Like, how do you get your name out there? There's just so many missing pieces. And we just saw that same very thing for other creative industries, right? Same for musicians,
Right.
same for filmmakers. You name it, and it's the same kind of problem
So,
at its core.
so you, in your experience with Pattern, as you opened it up to other industries, it was a similar thing of, we're looking for mentors and guidance, access to funding, or spaces to congregate or to create. Is it that kind of a similar theme, or were there any differences between surprising differences between the industries, or did you find that more or less it was a similar kind of thread with all of the people that were showing up?
Very similar thread,
Mm-hmm.
very similar thread across the board. So we decided that we were going to try to solve for all of it, which is probably insane.
I mean, it's hard, right? I mean, I'm in the same uh, business of, how do you provide, there's the entrepreneurial education, the overarching of like, how do you run a business, the finances of it, the marketing, these things are, kind of across sectors. And then there's also very specific needs, sector specific needs, depending on what your craft is. And
Right.
so solving that, I think, that's why I'm so curious in terms of how you approached, building that out, because it seems like you've built out really a massive, list of mentors, and you've helped a lot of people, and you've done a lot of events. And what have you found success in with creating programs for these kind of creative entrepreneurs?
Well, first, I guess I'm glad that from the outside looking in, it looks like, oops, sorry, I got to move to turn the lights back on.
That's good. Environmental. Oh.
Environmental, exactly. I'm glad that it seems like we've had massive success. I think that there's definitely room to grow.
Mm.
I think that just telling the story of the importance of creative entrepreneurs and helping people understand that uh, there's a sort of distinction between nonprofit arts and arts and culture, where people just think, oh, that's always going to have to be supported by philanthropy. And then, okay, there's all of these creative sectors and jobs that are actually huge drivers of economies and revenue, like any other industry. And they need to be invested and supported like you would support all the traditional industries that we have here in Indiana, right? And so just sharing that narrative over and over and over again, one person at a time, has been sort of my preoccupation, I would say, for the last 3 to 4 years. But we have been, anecdotally, Pattern has represented sort of a hope in the darkness, if you will. The biggest challenge that we have as a city and as a state is that we lose talent, right? There is a huge talent retention problem specifically in the creative fields. And so we have been trying to program in a way that gives people reason to want to stay in Indiana, or at least come back if they leave. And that is introducing them to the community that is small but mighty, and making them feel like they belong to something, like that there is a lot of activity and energy, and that is all true for us as a region, for sure, and as a state as well. There's a lot of really interesting things going on, happening from Evansville all the way up to Gary and Terre Haute and all of those places. But it's all very, because there's not like a central marketing agency for the creative economy and
Mm,
the sectors that go along with it. Like, nobody knows. If you know, you know. It's like a speakeasy. Our creative economy is like a speakeasy. You got to know the password, right?
right.
And you got to know where to look for the crazy, like, hidden door. But if
Mm,
once you walk through that door, you're like, oh my God, there's so much going on.
right.
And so we've been trying to like solve for that and be the door in a lot of respects, but also we're a pretty small organization. We just hired our fourth full timer. I tell anybody that'll listen that we have enough work for 20 people
Yeah.
based on the demand from our community. So, still very much trying to solve for it. Super excited because on October 27th, we are planning the first Indiana Creative Economy Summit,
Oh,
where we're
wow.
inviting a bunch of policymakers and legislators and heads of philanthropic and civic and corporate entities to really just bring it all together and get them excited about the possibilities, because there's a lot of potential.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same for us here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Similar issues of, you know, explaining that the creative economy is an economic driver.
Hmm.
People don't really understand that, or they're like, oh, well, it's just music, but there's so many things, or film, or there's so many things even around those industries that can help growth. So we're also in the same boat of explaining to funders and people that this is an important field and an important sector to focus on
Yeah.
and to push resources in, and also talent retention. I mean, Chicago obviously is a big city, but at the same time we lose a lot of talent, to the East Coast or the West Coast,
Right.
because it's a great place to build your craft and to innovate, and it's a very supportive community here. But in terms of the actual industry that exists within Chicago, it's not as robust
Yep.
as Los Angeles or New York. So for us, it's like, how do we attract businesses to come to Chicago, set up shop? How do we encourage people to start businesses that
Right.
will support those communities here?
Yeah. Same. And I think that Indiana is known for being friendly to businesses. Um, and so we do. I see news articles all the time that say, hey, this manufacturing plant is moving here, or this, agricultural, startup is moving there, but it's never like creative, right? It's never like a huge, I don't know, advertising agency,
Mm,
or all of a
mhm.
sudden, some Hollywood production company is building a back lot, out in the cornfields. Like, you don't hear that, which is kind of a miss. I actually think that like the Midwest is, the people are nicer, the cost of living is, I think, better. Um, I think that a lot of businesses from other markets, especially the coasts, can do their business here a lot cheaper with people who are like a lot more amenable
Yeah.
to being great team players, and that we don't have a lot of divas, right, in the Midwest. I feel like.
Yeah. No, I agree. And if I'm, what does it look like being a member or belonging to Pattern? Like, what is kind of your membership on board, or what can you expect when you join the organization, or you're a part of the organization?
So we have tossed around the idea of having an official membership for a
Hmm.
very long time. We do not yet have that.
Okay.
I have been working for years to try and secure a huge space, right, to enable some of that co-working, shared amenity, kind of like what you guys have. I'm
Yeah.
so jealous, so jealous. I want what you have.
Yeah. Well, you have to
Um,
come and visit. You have to come and check it out.
I absolutely, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd love to. But I've there's been a couple of times when that has been almost within our reach as an organization and it didn't end up panning out.
Hmm.
And that is still a goal and a dream. Um, because I feel like the instances when we had space where other people could come into it, people don't want to leave. So there's definitely like a hunger to be part of like a thing that's more tangible, especially now, like with all the virtual stuff. I still, I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but people are still hungry for interaction in person. But what we do is we do events. So that's how our community accesses us primarily is we have monthly think tanks which are basically panels. We have, by virtue of having a website, every month we do a different theme. We put a different person on our digital cover. That person is invited to come and speak at a panel or a fireside chat, I should say, to share their experiences. And so, because we're constantly changing up who those people are, like we pluck them from different industries, we have like a rotating roster of various people coming in from different interests and backgrounds. So that's one thing. The other thing is because we do have a print publication, which is a whole other story. We have it comes out twice a year, and so twice a year we have launch parties, and those are really well attended, and it's just sort of like a who's who of indie's creative scene. I would really love to grow what we're doing statewide. Right
Hmm.
now, we're very much in the central Indiana region. But other than that, people can access us through social media and newsletter and kind of reach out directly. We try to be as accessible as we can. Sometimes that's hard because we've got so much going on and it's a small team again, but
Right.
it's all about trying to open doors and connect people to one another.
And talk a little bit more about the magazine. Is it? Do you guys actually do a physical print or is it a digital magazine?
It's both.
Okay.
So our website is our digital magazine. We have stories that go up every week. The print is something that started back in 2012. It was an accident. I mean, nobody in their right mind would launch a fashion publication in Indianapolis. It's, again, no longer fashion, it is more like lifestyle and culture, if you will.
Hmm.
And it is what I like to call a portable cultural asset, the best that we have, I think, as a region and as a state, because it tells the stories in a very beautiful way of the creatives that we do have and shows them off to the rest of the world and gives them an opportunity also to like do some fun creative stuff. So like as a graphic designer working, let's say for Eli Lilly, you kind of can probably guess at how many interesting, unique, super creative campaigns you get to do as a
Right.
graphic designer. With the magazine, we'll invite designers to just like, here's some amazing photos, like do a layout. So it's been a great tool. It's not, the magazine is not a moneymaker. So if anybody's watching this and they're like, ooh, yeah, I want to launch my magazine. I hear I can make some good money and sell advertising. Okay, I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe I'm just really bad at selling advertising because ultimately it fell to me and it still does,
Right.
unfortunately. But we use it as a marketing piece.
Yeah.
It is our calling card. It is not. If we look at our budget and there are line items under profit, it is definitely not there. It is on the expense side as a marketing tool. But it's been great. It's one of my favorite things to do as part of the work that I do with Pattern.
Yeah, I love the idea of it, and the fact that you've been executing it, and it's important, I think, for any organization. I mean, and I can speak for ourselves of how do we gather these stories together, important stories, and tell the world about what's happening in Chicago, what's happening with people coming through this space. What are some things that people are creating that's interesting and new and exciting?
Yeah,
But being able to keep that consistency is hard, right? Like the
it
same
is.
thing for us of finding funding to support the creation because putting together a magazine and all of that takes time and effort. And if you want to do it well, you have to really focus on all the aesthetics of the
Yep,
look, the feel, making sure it's kind of coherent. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, but but I think in terms of it's important for those things to exist.
for
Uh,
sure.
you
For
know,
sure.
I mean, even here would be, I would love to do something like that. I mean, we have other things, but when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's a really great marketing tool and a community builder.
It is.
Makes people feel really seen and supported when they see their name in print, in a magazine that's being pushed out to other
Yeah.
people.
No, you exactly. You nailed it. You completely understand the value proposition of and that it's been too good to let go. I'll be honest. There's been certainly many times over the years of trying to figure out how to monetize it, and it has been, and to some extent still remains, a volunteer driven effort. Like,
Mm.
most of the people that contribute to this publication are not paid. More so now. I mean, we're getting to a point where we are paying people, which is kind of the point of all this, right? It's like getting away from being a community or a city where creatives are expected to do things for exposure, right? Like, that's just like,
Right.
just God, and we never pitched it that way to any of the people who contributed out of the goodness of their heart. I think they just love the product and were proud to be a part of it. It wasn't, we were never like, oh, you should like do the shoot or write the story for free because it'll be good exposure. I think they just wanted to be a part of it, but trying to get away from that as much as we can. But it's super special. And we've never, even those conversations like, well, this is costing us a lot of money, because it costs, each issue just to print is about $25,000.
Wow.
And that's been the bulk like of our fundraising and whatever small, inroads we've made with advertisers. That's where all that goes, is
Wow.
towards printing costs, because
Yeah.
it's oversized. The magazine it has a particular type of paper. It's 11 and a half by 14. So it
Mhm.
is large format. It is a thing of beauty. When you bring that thing in, people sit up a little straighter and like their eyes open up a little wider, because they're like, wait, what?
Is that the same size as like Cultured magazine? I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a great
It's
magazine.
it's a really good door opener for sure.
Yeah.
So we were like, no, we're gonna keep doing this. Like, we'll figure it out eventually. So
Cool.
getting
And
close.
so you talked about kind of this exciting event coming up where you get to talk with legislators about the creative economy in Indiana and Indianapolis. What
Yep.
are some things that are kind of upcoming for pattern for even you personally that you're working on, that we can hear about?
You mean at the conference or just generally?
Just generally.
Well, right now, all of our attention is focused on volume 24 of the magazine, which will be about the creative economy, which will dovetail with the conference and launch that same evening. So the conference is on October 27th. The launch party is on October 27th in the evening. So it's going to be a really long day. Um, we're also moving offices. We're in the Stutz building, which is downtown. It's a historic building that's being renovated right now. And I'm sitting in one of this.
Yeah, I love it. There it is.
This is going to be a photography studio when all is said and done. But
Awesome.
we also, as part of an arrangement that the city made with the developer, we have some spaces that we're using for creative entrepreneurs. So we have a creative entrepreneurship residency where we're I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but it's a little bit of we're building the plane as we're flying it. That's
Oh
just
yeah,
how it
please.
works.
I think everyone is.
I don't let people admit it though, but we're doing that. We're trying to create I am trying to run this pilot, get some really good data and metrics out of it so that we can, again, attempt to get funding to do more, right?
Yeah.
Because whereas our tech industry is doing really well, we have several big industries that seem to find the resources for incubating innovation and entrepreneurs under those specific industry umbrellas. Like, by we, I mean creative entrepreneurs don't have the same consideration. And so I'm trying to build out a residency that specifically is able to cater to musicians, to filmmakers, not just fine artists. We're not leaving them out, but content creators. I mean, the whole roll call of all
Yeah.
the people that do cool stuff and make a city feel so much more exciting and interesting, right?
Yeah, and I mean the pilot is for everyone out there who's building organizations. When you focus on a small pilot, like you said, you're able to then collect data, and kind of get real time feedback, and then present that to a funder.
Right.
I mean, that is
That's the plan.
definitely the smart thing, right? I know we're we're also doing something similar, with a music cohort that we're going to launch in probably 2 months,
Awesome.
um, and just kind of testing out to see how we can have impact. But you have to start with a small community because, like you
Yep.
said,
Yep.
our capacity is small.
Yep.
And all funders, whether it be foundations, businesses, or even government, the first thing they ask about is, what kind of data do you have?
Right.
What kind of
Right.
feedback? And you can tell the story, but it's really great when you can tell the story and show the data.
Yeah.
Well,
For sure.
that's really exciting. I was happy to learn about your organization, also because you and I are basically in the same boat in terms of kind of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to
Yep.
build, in a lot of ways. How do you deal with fear or doubt when you're building these new things and going into new spaces?
Well, I don't know.
I think most people laugh about that. Like, they have a pause and then they laugh and they're like,
Right.
I don't know. I mean, uh, you know,
I so I think I'm an external processor.
hmm,
I think it helps if you're an external processor because that means I think in my um, translation of what I think that means, you don't spend a lot of time like analyzing in your head all the things that can go wrong. Like you maybe have like an idea that like okay, well things might not go as planned, but you don't start breaking all that down internally. Well, what if this happens? What if this happens? Oh my god,
mm,
what if this? Like I just don't do that. My mantra, and I've been doing this for long enough to where even if I have doubts, I'm just like, shh, irrelevant. You just got to start trucking, right? And I think we all know at this point that failure is valuable, right?
right,
You want to fail. You want to find all the stumbling blocks and get rid of them as fast as you can. That's how you learn. That's how the product becomes better. So I think most of us, if there is fear of failure, it's because we're concerned what others will think of us, right? Will they judge us? Will we be laughed at? And that is, of course, a very uncomfortable feeling.
yeah,
But also, if you've done a bunch of things and nobody else is doing them, it's like, you know what?
right,
I'd like to see somebody laugh at this. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't, yes, I haven't spent a lot of time figuring out how to break through the barriers. I just keep going. And I think my advantage is that literally everything that I've done over the last 14 years, I had no professional background in.
right,
I think that helps. Like if I had come from publishing, would I have ever launched a print publication? Of course not. I would
yeah.
have known all the pitfalls. I would have known how much work it is, how expensive it is, how frustrating. But you know what? You go ahead and you do it. I think we need to give ourselves more credit. I think we all need to be like, I'll just figure it out when I get there.
And it's that curiosity. I think there's something about entrepreneurs of just being curious. Well, let me try this.
Yeah.
This seems like a good idea. I come from a similar cloth where I just go, and sometimes I fall on my face and I'm like, well, that didn't go well, but I always grow from it and learn from it.
Exactly.
And I think, for all of us, and what you're talking about is why you build communities, of people who are in similar, fields as you, or are entrepreneurs, or are building things in the creative economy. It's nice to have a community of people to rely on for work, for support, for questions, when you're trying to build something, because building any kind of creative or artistic career is a risk, right? It's
Correct.
not, we're not promised anything,
Correct.
which I also think makes us great hustlers and makes us work hard and be fearless in a lot of ways, because there
Right.
are no guarantees.
Right.
Um, like, when you show up for, you know, a photography gig, like, you have to shoot. You can't just be like, I don't feel good today, right?
Right.
You got to do your thing.
Right.
And you can't talk about how good of a photographer, you have to show it. Same thing with being a musician or being a filmmaker. Like, you can talk as much as you want, but at the end of the day, the work is what shows.
Right.
Um, but yeah, And what would you never compromise on your career?
So help me understand that a little bit better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of, like, let's, for example, the last person we asked that said, "I'll never compromise on pay," which I thought was a
Oh,
great answer. I mean, that's the best answer we've got. Um, some people say they're workers, the people they work with. Uh, those are the two I can think offhand. But I mean,
okay.
just in terms of your approach,
Sure.
maybe with working with people, things that you're like absolutely not, or you know, I don't, I won't rush something if I want high quality, for the magazine or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I don't know that I've been asked before. I think one of my superpowers is that I am actually somebody who's very good at compromising.
Mm,
I'm extremely flexible.
yeah.
Um, but I also want things done at a really high level.
Right.
So I don't know. I think maybe there's probably several answers to that question.
Mm-hmm.
But when you work as hard, I think, as we do, there has to be like an element of enjoyment and fun.
There it is. Yes. There.
So the magazine is fun to put together. Like, I will not lie. If it was not, I wouldn't be doing it, as painful as it is. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, you know what? The pay is shit, but like, at least we're having fun. At least we like one another. At least this feels communal, and like we're all in this together. And I think that that's the thing that makes it worthwhile for me. So I would not want to work in a situation where I didn't like my coworkers and I wasn't able to laugh with them on a daily basis over, the ridiculousness of all of this, really.
Yeah. I love that idea of, I my career has to be fun. There has to be enjoyment. I mean, that's just such a
Absolutely.
gift for life. I mean, that's a great. Well, we found a great answer.
Okay, good, 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 good.
Okay, so the final question. Do you have a suggestion for our listeners out there, something that inspires you, either personally or professionally, whether it be music, video, film, podcast, whatever?
So I'm a big fan of Paul Graham
Hmm.
and his essays. He is, I believe, the guy who started the Y Combinator,
Yep.
one of the founders. And some of the things that he talks about, he's got a lot of technical stuff and talks about like super like nerdy like coding stuff that I don't understand. But he's got some really great essays that are like related to how to do good work, how to find the work that you should be doing, how to determine whether this is your career path, all of like this common sense stuff to help people find their way. He's got a great essay that I made my one of my daughters read about how you should approach high school. And his whole thing was like, high school, you should approach it as a job. Like, it's
Mm,
your first job. Like, you come in and you do the job. The job is to learn. Like, you're not supposed to be entertained. You're here for a specific purpose. And then everything outside of that, you can hustle, you can learn, you can play, whatever, right? Like, and I'm not doing it justice. It's an 8-page essay, and it's got some really, really great juicy stuff in there about being a high schooler, and also what it means like when you graduate and what that looks like and what you should be prepared for. And it's great.
that's great. I love that suggestion.
Yeah, it's
Well,
gold.
Polina, it's great to meet you and have this conversation. I look forward to meeting you in person
Yes, I'd
at
love
some
that.
point, and we'll definitely make that happen. It's wonderful to learn, about your work in Indiana and Indianapolis. For everyone, just gonna put the website below to
Thank
check
you.
out what Paulina is doing. Wishing you the best of luck in the launch of this next magazine.
You
And
need to come down. Come
yeah,
on. We're
yeah,
not that far. We're just
three
3 hours
hours.
south.
It's just 3 hours because the time changed. Right? So you're like super, it's not that far, but all of a sudden you're in a different time zone. Um,
That's true. That's
but
true.
I've played some weddings in Indianapolis. I've been down there a couple times. One for I think Arts Midwest was there.
Okay.
Um, I don't know. This is probably pre-pandemic, but yeah, definitely. I would love to connect with you and check out
That would be
what
great.
you guys are doing. Um, but again, thank you for taking some time out of your day to talk with me. It's great to
My
learn
pleasure.
about what you are building, and wishing you all the luck.
Thank you, and likewise.
All right. Wow, what a great conversation with Paulina Osherov of Pattern Indie. It's great to talk to somebody who is basically a colleague in terms of how do we build community, how do we build infrastructure for creative entrepreneurs that has impact, that helps economic growth within the cities that we live. So definitely check out what she's doing if you're in Indiana or Indianapolis. It is a really interesting thing to learn about. And the magazine, I definitely want to check it out, the physical copy of it. Um, Again, my name is Daniel Crane. I am the program director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship, and you have been listening to Global Industry Spotlight. We are streaming live out of the Comcast Business Startup Studio, located at 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. Visit cceglobal.org to register for free workshops. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, and tune in next week for another episode of Global Industry Spotlight. In 2 weeks, we have Jaime Garza, musician, producer, and cultural promoter in Chicago. Wishing everyone a great end to their week. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will speak with you soon. Take care.